There it is. Hey, how's it going, everybody? That's the sound of interview starting here on Drum Talk TV. Dan Shinder here up in Globe, Arizona, 100 miles east of Phoenix, where it's a little cooler and definitely quieter, except for when I play. Here with David Northrup, returning offender. It's been quite a few years, David. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing? Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. If I remember correctly, last time you were on, you had just put out a really great solo album.
Wow, yeah, that was a few years back. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. We talked about the solo record that I had out. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, which was great. We had you on years before that when you were with the Oak Ridge Boys, and
yeah,
us seeing you perform with them was such a great experience. We were still in Las Vegas at that time, so that had to be at least 9 years ago because we've been here 8.5 years. But to see the Oak Ridge Boys was literally probably the best living example at the time of Americana music. I mean, it really was.
yeah.
It
They
was,
class act.
yeah, such a treat. But of more recently, you were Rick Derringer's probably most recent drummer that performed with him, toured with him. You put his band together for that era. Let's talk about Rick going backwards, and we'll talk about how you got that gig in the beginning. But Rick Derringer, lost him recently. Great
Mhm.
musician, going so far back, and not only a great musician, but really great producer. Among his credits, the first Weird Al Yankovic album he produced. I mean, guy had some serious credits. Played with Johnny Winter, Edgar Winter, Hang On Sloopy. I mean, just legendary. And of course, his own work. How would you describe him as a musician to work with and just as a guy?
Rick was pretty deep. Um, he definitely was not just a rock guitar player. He definitely had like some depth to his musicianship. And having the chops to play with Steely Dan. That's
Yeah.
sophisticated music. Um, so it was always one of those things where you knew you were going to be challenged. And he brought it every night. Holy cow! So he was older. You and just every time we played, it was, excuse the expression, balls to the walls. That guy had a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So it was always really really intense playing with him. And he was such a great guy. And he hated this, I know personally. He was a little guy. He was short. He
Yeah.
was small, but man, he was a fireball. When he
Yeah.
got his guitar on, man, he was intense.
Well, it's one of the biggest, and you don't have to name just one, but what's one of the biggest or some of the things you took away from working with him that has woven into your fabric of being a musician and a drummer and producer?
Um, uh, Humility. He was a humble guy, you
Yeah.
know, and I think that maybe from a distance because of everything that he had accomplished. I think sometimes people might have thought that he was unapproachable, but that's
Right.
the exact opposite. He had a very quiet, almost maybe a shy demeanor, but
Mhm.
he definitely made time for everyone. There is a good friend of mine that that plays guitar for Alan Parsons,
Mhm.
and we did one of those rock tours, boat
Oh, the cruise?
cruise, yeah. And he really wanted to meet Rick, and he was a little apprehensive to go up to him. I was like, "Oh man, come on!" I had an opportunity just to introduce him, and he was so surprised how friendly and open and how much time Rick gave to him, you know.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Man, I wasn't expecting that." I'm like, "Well, that's Rick. He's just a good man. He's good soul. He knew the Lord too. He was a Christian, you know. So I obviously played with him in his later years. I know that earlier on in his career, there was a lot of partying and a lot of craziness.
Yeah.
He came around and I guess settled down some.
Right.
You know,
Right. I met him once in 19 it had to be 80 or 81. And I grew up in West Hills, California, folks, which is the west end of the San Fernando Valley, part of Los Angeles.
mm.
And he was going to be playing this particular night at a theater, literally maybe 3 miles, 4 miles from my house. I didn't go see the show and I think the only reason I didn't go see it has to be because I had a show. But during the day, he did a meet and greet at the most famous record store in our area, which was a great chain of record stores at the time called Licorice Pizza.
Okay,
And
cool.
I remember my girlfriend Claire and I, hi Claire, still friends with Claire from way back then.
Hi, Claire.
Yeah, we brought the flyer, and I'm sure I still have it in my box of stuff that's in my studio. I'm sure I
That's cool.
still have a flyer advertising it that we brought. And he said to Dan and Claire, lots of love, Rick. And he
That's
signed it.
cool.
And I do remember two things. I'm short, I'm 5 on a great day. On a really great day with great posture, I'm maybe 5'7.5". I used to be 5'9" with hair. And
Yeah.
and when I met Rick, I was surprised how much shorter. He was 5'4". He was shorter than me. And he just had such calm, even back then, clear eyes, um, the gentleness. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, that's the same guy that I've seen, play. And I've had his first live album with Vinny Appice
Oh,
on
yeah.
drums. And it's such a legendary album cover, folks. If you're not familiar with it, if you flip it over on the back, you see the whole band, outdoor stage, Rick at one far side, the other guitar player at the other far side. And they're both like this. And if you look at the top middle of that picture, their guitars are crossing in the air. And these guys had to be 30 feet apart from each other. Great album. And it was like, wow, that's the same guy. Because like you said, you saw, the humility he had and the kindness just in spending a couple minutes with him. So I can imagine
Yeah.
what it was like working with him for quite a while.
Yeah, he had some incredible stories and I think I overlooked the gravity of what he had done. I remember seeing his name on Steely Dan credits.
Right.
I remember hearing that he produced Cyndi Lauper and of course the Edgar Winter stuff and then his stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess I didn't appreciate how highly revered he was. And perhaps just because, he was such a humble guy, you
Yeah,
know.
that makes sense. He didn't project that,
No,
you
man.
know?
It was so cool. We had an opportunity to open for Steely Dan when I was with him. And to see him and Donald Fagen, kind of interact was kind of funny because, he called him Ricky, and
Yeah.
there's that whole story about Ricky don't lose that number, which actually wasn't directly the song itself isn't about Rick, but I think the title actually was because he spoke about had this story where when he was in New York and Donald was in the studio doing a recording, um, he was trying to get a hold of Rick to come in and do some tracks. Well, Rick didn't have Donald's new number. Of course, this is back when there was no cell phones
Right.
and there were calling services. You would call and leave a message and say, "Hey, I need to have Rick Derringer, come to the studio." So you'd call your your message service, and leave
Mhm.
a message. So, Donald or whomever, I think Gary Katz or whoever the producer was, called and left a message, but they didn't leave a number.
Ah,
So Rick didn't have the number. So finally, after a few days of trying to figure out how to get in touch, he shows up at the studio, and they were like, "Well, where you been?" And I'm like, I didn't have your number. I didn't have your new number." It's like, "Oh my God, sorry, blah, 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 blah." So, they do their business. And just before uh, he leaves the studio, Donald writes down his new information. He's like, "Now, Ricky, don't lose this number. This is my new number."
oh, wow.
Da-da. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have video of us rehearsing here at my house here. I've got a studio I've kind of built out in my garage, but even before I built it out, he came up from Florida and we had some rehearsals here, and I videotaped and recorded some of them. And I do that a lot just to be able to review stuff. But I was able to record some of him, telling some of those stories. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, I'm gonna go back, through them and see if I could cut them up and share them. I think
That'd
it'd
be
be really
great.
interesting. Yeah, it was
I'd love
really,
to help you
really
with
cool.
that and help
Yeah,
spread the word. That's
yeah,
fabulous. Yeah. You're in
yeah.
Nashville, right?
Yep, still
Yeah,
in
you still
Nashville.
there? Great. Great. Stephen, our producer, has a little collection of photos that you sent. I'm going to ask Steve to share those on the screen. And as he does, perhaps you could narrate
Yeah, sure.
what's going on there and stuff. Most of them are family friendly. There's a couple that, no, I'm kidding. They're all family.
Yeah,
But Steve, if you could get those queued up. Um, Gosh, I bet those stories have just been never ending. There you guys are. When
yeah.
was that?
That was in Ohio. They had a I think an anniversary for the Ludlow Garage.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I believe it might have been the 50th anniversary. So the Ludlow Garage thing was a venue in Cincinnati, and they had a lot of, like, the Allman Brothers recorded a live record there. Myself personally, I wasn't really familiar with it, but so excuse me, we had the opportunity to go up there and play. So that was a live venue, and that's during sound check. I just snapped a pic
And
of
he
him.
he looks great. And if I remember correctly,
Excuse me.
about the time you started playing with Rick, he must have been what, 68, 69 around
Yeah,
then? Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah. He
that sounds right.
looks
Yeah,
great.
he did look great. He was great. He was in great health, and you
Yeah.
know,
Let's see what else we got, Steve.
and yeah, that was in Union City, Ohio. I guess I'm going to
Mhm.
assume it's Ohio. The area that he was from. It might have even been the town that he was from.
Mm.
Uh, they were celebrating the McCoys. They had uh, they had taken a wall uh, of a building that was by a park, and they had painted a mural celebrating Rick Derringer and the McCoys.
Wow.
Yeah, which was very, very cool. And in fact, I just posted.
That goes way back.
Yeah, I just posted. I found some footage of us playing. I wish the audio was better. The video came up pretty good. The video was actually pro shot, or somewhat pro shot,
Mhm.
and it was a song that wasn't one of his more popular ones. It was a newer, pretty hot, heavy rock song. I believe his wife Jenda wrote the lyrics and he wrote the music to it. It's called
Oh,
"Sometimes." Pretty smoking song. But I recognize the tie because you wore a tie that night.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's great. Let's see the next one.
yeah, that's cool, man. That was sound check at the in Cincinnati for that Ludlow garage celebration. That was a pretty
Cool.
cool gig. Yeah,
Awesome. Nice guitar too.
yeah.
Ah, that's a great photo. What a great
Yeah, that might have been the same. I can't remember. No, I don't know where that is. Yeah, it was just Rick being Rick.
yeah.
Yeah, it was fun times.
Oh, that's a great shot too.
Yeah, so that is the very first gig with uh, the bass player Steve Forrest
Mhm.
and the keyboard player Tim McDonald, and he had toured with a trio, I believe, for a long time. And in fact, when I first got with him, we had a different bass player, a great bass player named Tony Nagy. And when we did the rock tour, Tony and I were his band, and Tony just decided he needed to stay on the road. So after doing a few shows with Rick, he had to decline to go back out, left on
Mm,
good terms. So when uh, Tony gave notice, Rick asked me to put some other guys together.
that's awesome.
Uh,
No pressure, right, Dave?
yeah, and the cool thing was he wanted to add a keyboard player, and it was the first time he had a four-piece band in
Yeah,
like 20 years or something. So that is in Las Vegas at the Golden Nugget, and
yeah.
that was our first show, and it went over pretty good.
That's awesome. And folks, if you're a fan of Rick Derringer, chime in with your favorite music or a memory of meeting him like I did, or a concert you saw, favorite album. Go ahead and chime in. Give Rick some love. The great late Rick Derringer. So good. What else do we have, Steve? Oh, that's a
Oh,
neat one.
yeah, that's cool. I can't remember where that is, but that's Steve Forrest on bass. Great smoking bass player here in town.
Yeah. Can you
Um,
zoom in, please, Steve? Steve Forrest playing
yeah,
a looks like a jazz bass.
I think it's a Sadowski.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, it's probably Sadowski. Rick played Warrior guitars.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that was a pretty smoking gig too. I think that was Indiana.
Okay. Cool. Next.
Yeah. Okay. So that's backstage at the Golden Nugget, and we're actually in Frank Sinatra's old dressing room.
I've been there twice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a couple of interviews there. I have a crazy story about one of those times. I don't know if it's appropriate to share it here, but a beautiful, beautiful, legendary room. Did you
Yes.
notice on the bar counter, which was marble, on the bar counter, there's a circle indentation from
Yes.
I
Tim
was talking
used
to
to spin his glass.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I said,
I'm
I bet
sorry.
he just maybe was doing that
Yeah.
for so long in the same place that it wore it down,
That's pretty
which
cool.
is crazy. But
So
did
that's
you
go ahead.
I was sorry, I was just gonna say, did you see the steam room
Oh
in
yeah,
his
of
yeah, it's just an
course.
amazing room that's still
This is
holding.
probably not appropriate either, Dan, but I sat on the toilet. I sat on the Frank Sinatra's throne.
You got to.
It's just like, and it's interesting. Sorry, I might be a little bit
No, that's okay.
out of taste, but
Not at
um
all.
but at least at that point, it was very cool how they had preserved that room. They put a bunch
Yeah.
of pictures up and stuff. Now I don't know. I played there. Interestingly enough, I played there before Rick.
You played there with
Yeah,
Oak Ridge Boys.
yes,
That's where we
correct.
saw you. Yeah.
Yeah, I played there with the Oak Ridge Boys, and I also
Yeah.
played there after Rick with John Michael Montgomery,
Mm.
and then I think I played there with Joe Nichols too. Um, so that's a really a lot of history there.
Yeah.
This picture, left to right, my left to right, that's Tim McDonald, who played B3 and keys and also sang.
Mhm.
Rick in the middle, that's Steve Forrest that played bass, and then myself there on the
It's a great
end.
photo.
Yeah, that was cool.
Rick didn't I mean, if you really look at him, he's ageless.
No, I know he really did. He's got a guy talking to another guy. It kind of sounds weird, but he had really good skin. You
Yeah,
know,
he definitely had the
um,
genes and just
yeah.
didn't age like you would think. You still
No,
see him in there from the '70s pictures and stuff. His hair's just shorter.
yeah, yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
This is a picture at my house after rehearsals. He actually, he came and he stayed at my house. I was just like, wow, Rick Derringer's hanging out at my house.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
awesome.
just fairly, you know, just like having a friend come over and hang out for a few days.
That's
So
awesome.
this was at the end of rehearsals before he was heading back to Florida.
That's great.
Yeah,
Awesome. Steve, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for walking us through memory lane there, David.
yeah, that was cool.
Did you have favorites that you looked forward to playing at each show with Rick and the guys?
Yeah, of course, Frankenstein was always cool.
Yeah.
We didn't do the drum breakdown, which was I kind of I was I was always hoping that we would eventually do that, but we just never did.
Yeah.
And because of the length and there was no
The longer
timbales or
version.
anything. That
Yeah.
one song that I recently posted sometimes, that was cool.
Yeah.
And then, Hang On Sloopy.
Yeah.
Uh, the reason for Sloopy was just the crowd reaction, you know,
Yeah.
um, just because of that
Because a lot of
song.
people don't know.
No,
They don't,
and you know what? I didn't either. I didn't either. I completely did not. And interestingly enough, uh, how I got the gig was through Les Dudek.
oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah. So after playing with Boz Scaggs, I was out with Boz Scaggs with 2017. Uh, Coincidentally, I worked with Les back in the early 90s when I was living in Florida, and Les had played with Boz. Um, but the, the, you know, the connection with Boz and Les had nothing to do with me getting the gig with Boz Scaggs. But after I played with Boz, I started playing with Les again, and Les and Rick knew each other, and Les's manager knew Rick and Rick's wife Jenda, and they had gone through some personnel changes, so they had reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in if would it be okay if I gave your name to Rick?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, sure, why not?" And so they did, and that's sort of how I got connected with Rick.
Awesome. That's awesome. What year
Yeah,
was Hang On Sloopy? Do you remember?
in the '60s,
Yeah.
the mid to late '60s, and he had these stories, dude, of playing with the Rolling Stones and
Yeah.
opening for the Beatles.
That's
It's like,
crazy,
are you?
right?
Yeah, it's insane. It's insanely crazy.
1965.
65. Well, that was before I was around.
I was 2, still trying to play with my belly button.
Yeah.
I think it was my belly button, but 1965, that goes way back. But yeah, opening with the Stones playing or the Beatles playing with the Stones. He was one of those names, right? That would pop up and you go, "Oh wow, Rick Derringer's on this?" Right?
Well,
Like with
yeah, that's that.
Dan,
Yeah, for sure. He played in Ringo Starr's All Star Band. He was
right?
in that band with Steve Lukather and Greg Bissonette.
Yeah.
Um, heavy band with Edgar Winter also.
The production work with like Cyndi Lauper, Weird Al Yankovic. I know he produced others. He he was like a real quiet guy when you really think of who he played with, and
Yeah, well, he was just kind of went under the radar.
yeah,
Another cool thing about when we did that rock tour, it was called Out of the Blue. The lead singer for the Moody Blues was hosting the whole thing,
mm,
and so Todd Rundgren was also on the cruise,
oh
and Todd and Rick knew each other, and in fact, Todd produced one of Rick's records. I think it was called Guitars and Women.
mm,
So those two, you know, hung out and had breakfast. And I'm a huge Todd Rundgren fan, so I
yeah,
had a chance to meet him, and that was kind of cool. But they were just buds, you know,
yeah.
and
That's
everybody knew him. It was interesting, you see all these rock guitar players on that cruise. Everybody wanted to, have a picture with Rick Derringer.
yeah,
You know,
legendary.
yeah,
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing all that. What do you have going on? What's next for you?
Well, I've been for the last 3 years. Actually, I'm on my fourth with a country artist here in Nashville named Joe Nichols.
Mhm.
Joe was pretty big in the early 2000s, 2002 to 2000, maybe 5 or 6, 7. Um, so I've been doing that for the last 3 years. This is my fourth year with him. This is the second year I've been his band leader. So I've been doing that, working here in my studio. I have a studio at my house, so I still recording a lot of tracks and stuff.
Great.
I produced a record that's just been released that is on iTunes and the streaming platforms, which is very interesting. A guy named Eric Buell. Eric Buell, the same Eric Buell from Buell Motorcycles.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So Eric, before he became this guru and this, brilliant designer of all things motorcycular, whatever. I'm making up words here. He was a musician in a band. He actually quit college and went on the road for 2 years.
Wow,
Lord
I
knows
didn't
what
know
happened.
this.
No, nobody knows this, and I had no idea who he was. A friend of mine just put me in contact with him and said, "Hey, I got this buddy that has some songs." A mutual friend of ours, a guy named Ray Gooden, that I knew from Florida. He lives in Wisconsin now, and he knew Eric. So long and the short of it, he connected us, and I had no idea who he was. So, I'm sitting there talking back and forth and putting together a production budget and all this stuff. And I just happened to go to YouTube and I looked him up. I'm like, holy crap, this guy's like pretty big in what he
Yeah.
does. So anyways, I produced a record for him that's coming. Well, it's out, but it's not out physically just yet, but it's all on the
What
streaming thing.
style is it? What can you tell us about
It's
the genre?
it's think of Bruce Springsteen meets John Mellencamp Americana with a little flair of country,
Wow.
and some of his songs are pretty interesting. We had a good time. We got a good time doing that. So that's
awesome.
kind of cool. Yeah. I'm still, doing my stuff every once in a while. I'll go up to New York and play some shows, promoting my record that I put out a little while ago.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that and ask if you're going to do another.
I need to. You know how it is. You got to have money first, and then once you have the money, you have to have the time. So usually, if you have the time, you don't have the money. So if there's anybody out there that has a lot of money that wants to just give it as a supportive gift, a tax deduction, whatever, get a hold of me.
First album was great. Just, I think, in some ways, not what a lot of people expected.
Absolutely.
It's very fusion-esque, and yeah,
you especially. I remember you said, "Man, I didn't know what to expect," and
yeah,
just because of the genre and living in Nashville.
Yeah. And a lot of the other work you did, I just had no idea what to expect. And without expectations, folks, here's this awesome fusion album. Not just great drumming, but all the music and the production's great. That should get you all the production gigs you ever need. It's really well done. I'm not just saying that. I'm a huge fan of that.
I'm very fortunate that I had some exceptional players and people. It's good to know people, that surround yourself with greatness and you should end up with something at least marginally good, right?
Absolutely. Michael Port says, surround yourself with people who enable you to do your best work. And
Amen.
That relates to every aspect of life. I have one more question, but before this one more all-important, all-encompassing question, I want to circle back to Rick Derringer with this video. Check this out, folks.
What's this?
and his voice is ageless as well. That's crazy.
Yeah, that was cool. Hey, can I add a gear, a drum geek
Yeah, please.
uh uh fact to that little
Yeah.
video? So I had been with Zildjian Cymbals for like a long time, 23 years, and I had just come off a, 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 a clinic tour, a mini clinic tour. I did like 4 or 5 uh, drum clinics at Sam Ash Music's around the 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 region,
Yeah.
and I had been listening to all these Paiste cymbals. So I ended up buying some Paiste cymbals, 2002 cymbals. Really loved them, and I just thought I'd use them here in my studio. So when we came to rehearse here, I used them during our rehearsals, and I fell in love so much with the Paiste stuff. I just decided, you know what? I'm going to start using these. So that was my first live gig with
With them.
them
Wow.
before I actually made the official switch. I actually called them and said, "Hey, I'm going to do this, and once Zildjian finds out, I'm sure they're not going to." And there's nothing against Zildjian. I just like the
Sure.
Paiste stuff. So that
Yeah.
that was the first time I played with them live and said, I'm just going to do this.
Wow, that's a neat little fact. That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, it was cool because I flew. That's backline gear, but I flew with my own snare drum and my own cymbals,
Yeah.
and they just sounded so perfect for his music, um, and felt great. So I was like, "Well, I'm gonna do this, and wow, I hope they'll pick me up because it'll be lonely out there without a cymbal endorsement, especially if I break something."
Did you work with Tim over there?
Tim Shahady?
Yeah.
Yes, Tim.
Yeah,
Tim
that's
was
great.
actually the guy that I was speaking to the whole time, and then
Great.
finally, they got me a hold of got me connected with Kelly
Yeah.
Paiste. Um, they're really good folks, and interestingly enough, the artist relation uh, guy for Gretsch is
Mhm.
Andrew Shreve, who used to be with Paiste. So it's
Right.
kind of cool. I had been dealing with Andrew for a little while. So he was also very helpful, instrumental in kind of getting me in contact with Tim Shahady
Yeah.
and Kelly. Yeah, it was pretty cool. But
That's great. Not a bad line of cymbals. John Bonham used those, Carl Palmer used those. I mean, it goes
yeah,
on and on. It's, got quite a legacy, that sound.
yeah, for sure. The other thing too is it's not always, especially if you have young players out there, it's not always about free stuff. I went out and bought
Right.
about $2,000 worth of cymbals because I wanted them.
Yeah.
And when I spoke with them, I'm like, "Hey, I don't need anything. I already bought these things. I'm doing this. It would be great to have you guys support me, but this is sort of my decision, and I've already made the investment." So it wasn't like I was looking for a handout.
Right. Right.
So I think that they were at least somewhat impressed that I was, committed,
Certainly.
invested in making the move. So, but yeah, that was I see that video and I remember that, and
That's
uh,
cool.
yeah,
Thanks
yeah,
for sharing that. Thanks for sharing all those stories. My last question, and I probably asked you this years ago when you were on before, but I don't remember the answer, and maybe the answer has changed, so I'm gonna ask it again. Maybe you won't remember the answer or the answer has changed because we change as people. But my
hmm
question is, outside of music, outside of recording, producing, touring, gigging, writing, composing, what do you like to do with your time outside of music? How do you have fun? Do you collect anything? Do you travel not for work? What do you like to do, David?
I love spending time with my family.
Great.
My wife and I are going to be celebrating 30 years next year. In fact,
Wow.
in fact,
Give that lady a medal, for
yeah,
goodness sakes.
you're right, dude. I'm telling you, boy, yeah, she's got angel wings already starting to sprout out her back, and having to live with me. But, I've just really been fortunate to marry somebody that she's like my friend. We hang out. you know.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
so yeah, spending time with her, my boys. I love to camp. I love being outside. I haven't done that in a while just because of being on the road. And
Yeah.
it's actually interesting, if you like the camp, you'll like the road, because it's
Yeah,
basically kind of that's what you're doing.
right.
Um, but I enjoy being outside when the weather's nice, you know.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned, hope you don't mind me bringing it up, you got a son getting married. First
Yes.
time for this experience as a parent. That's got to be crazy.
Our youngest son, Miles, who just turned 22, which is kind of young, him and his wife to be, Katia, are getting married in October of
Great.
this year. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting.
That's
I
a
got to,
milestone.
yeah, milestone, no pun intended with him being named Miles. Did that one. Yeah.
There you go. Well,
Yeah.
David, thank you so much for coming on and not just only bringing us up to date with what you're up to, but sharing the stories of being around and playing with Rick Derringer, just a priceless guy in the world of pop and rock music.
I
And
agree.
it's been fun listening to you, unfold those stories of what he was like as a man and a musician and someone to work with. Really appreciate it.
It was an absolute privilege to share the stage with him and consider him my friend. So, I appreciate you taking the time to allow me to, you know, talk about my time with him and anything we can do to continue to uh, honor him because he was a pretty special guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Thanks, David. And thank you, everybody, for following what we do here on Drum Talk TV and joining David Northrup and myself, Dan Shinder. And we will see you soon with more fun stuff. Dave, hang on the line with me for a moment, okay?
sure.
All right. Thanks, everyone.